The gunshot echoed through the valley like thunder, startling a flock of birds from their perch in the cottonwood trees. Sarah Keller's hands trembled as she pressed a clean cloth against the stranger's bleeding shoulder, her eyes darting toward the horizon where dust clouds signaled approaching riders. The wounded man beneath her touch stirred, his weathered face contorting with pain as consciousness returned to him for the second time since she dragged him into her small homestead cabin. Wyoming Territory, 1882, a land where law was still finding its footing and danger rode freely across the open plains. "Hold still," Sarah instructed, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "That's the second bullet I've had to dig out of you, and I'm not particularly eager to go for a third." The man's eyes fluttered open, startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin. He took in his surroundings with the wary assessment of someone accustomed to waking in unfamiliar places. His gaze finally settled on Sarah, and she noticed how he tensed beneath her ministrations. "I don't want pity," he growled, attempting to push himself upright despite his injuries. Sarah pressed him back down with surprising strength for her slender frame. "Good," she replied evenly. "I only offer care. Now lie still before you undo all my handiwork." Something in her tone must have convinced him, for he relaxed marginally against the straw-filled mattress. Sarah continued cleaning the wound, carefully inspecting her earlier stitching work. "Name's Samuel Keene," he offered after a prolonged silence. "Most folks call me Sam." "Sarah Keller," she replied without looking up from her task. "Most folks don't call me anything because I prefer to keep to myself." A ghost of a smile crossed his cracked lips. "Yet here I am, taking advantage of your hospitality." "Hospitality implies I invited you," Sarah countered, though without malice. "You collapsed on my property with 2 bullets in you and a posse on your trail. That makes you more of a complication than a guest." Sam chuckled, then immediately winced at the pain it caused. "Fair assessment, Miss Keller." The distant sound of hoofbeats grew louder and Sarah's hands stilled. She moved to the window, carefully peering through a gap in the curtains. A group of 7 riders approached, their horses kicking up dust as they made their way toward her small homestead. "Friends of yours?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Not likely," Sam replied, his voice tightening. His hand moved instinctively to his side where his gun would normally be holstered. "Looking for this." Sarah retrieved a well-worn Colt revolver from a nearby shelf. "I removed it when I brought you in. Seemed prudent." Sam's eyes narrowed. "You might want to consider returning it given our current situation." Sarah hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet. First, I need to know why those men are after you. I won't be harboring a murderer or a thief." "I'm neither," Sam insisted, struggling to sit up despite the pain. "Though they'd likely tell you otherwise." The riders were close now, close enough that their voices carried on the wind. Sarah made a swift decision and tucked the revolver into the waistband of her skirt, concealed by her apron. "Stay quiet," she ordered, then grabbed a nearby broom and began sweeping the porch as casually as she could manage as the riders approached. The leader of the group, a heavyset man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest, reined in his horse a few yards from her cabin. His eyes, small and set deep in his fleshy face, surveyed her and the property with open suspicion. "Afternoon, madam," he called out, removing his hat in a gesture that seemed more performative than respectful. "Sheriff Bill Hollister from Sweetwater. We're tracking a fugitive, dangerous man who shot up a saloon and killed a prominent citizen." Sarah leaned on her broom, affecting an air of rural simplicity. "I haven't seen anyone pass through, Sheriff. It's just me out here." The sheriff exchanged glances with his companions. "Mind if we take a look around? Man we're after was heading this direction, wounded pretty bad, might have sought shelter." "I mind very much," Sarah replied, straightening her spine. "My husband's not here at present, and it wouldn't be proper to have men searching through my home." It was a lie, there was no husband, but it was a necessary fiction for a woman living alone in these parts. The sheriff's expression darkened. "This isn't a social call, madam. We're after a killer." "And I'm telling you he's not here," Sarah insisted. "Now, unless you have a warrant, I'll thank you to move along. My husband's due back any minute, and he doesn't take kindly to strangers intimidating me." One of the men, younger than the others with a cruel twist to his mouth, spat tobacco juice onto her dusty yard. Maybe we should wait for him then, have a little chat. The sheriff held up his hand, silencing his companion. He studied Sarah for a long moment before settling his hat back on his head. We'll ride on for now, but if you see anything suspicious, you send word to Sweetwater immediately. Man we're after is Samuel Keene, tall fellow, dark hair, likely wounded in the shoulder and side. Sarah nodded, her expression carefully neutral. I'll keep an eye out, Sheriff. The men wheeled their horses around, but the sheriff lingered a moment longer. Word of advice, madam, be careful who you trust out here. Some men aren't what they appear to be. With that cryptic warning, he rejoined his posse, and they rode away from her property, heading east. Sarah continued sweeping until they were mere specks on the horizon before hurrying back inside. Sam was sitting up, one hand pressed against his bandaged side, his face pale with the effort. You lied to them, he observed. Why? Sarah set the broom aside and checked the window to ensure the riders were truly gone. I don't trust men who travel in packs, especially when their leader can't look me in the eye while asking for favors. She moved to the stove where a pot of stew had been simmering. Besides, they called you a killer, are you? Sam's jaw tightened. Not the way they mean it. That's not a denial, Sarah noted, ladling stew into a bowl. No, it's not, Sam agreed quietly. I've killed men in the war in self-defense, but I didn't shoot up any saloon, and I certainly didn't murder any prominent citizen as they claim. Sarah brought him the bowl and helped prop him up against the wall. Eat. Then you can tell me what really happened and why I just risked my neck for a stranger. Sam accepted the food gratefully, though his hands shook slightly as he spooned the hot stew into his mouth. After a few bites, color began returning to his face. I was a ranch hand at the Blackstone spread, he began, his voice low. Been there about 6 months. The owner, James Blackstone, has a daughter, Jennifer. Beautiful girl, kind-hearted. We became close. Sarah raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Nothing improper, Sam clarified. But her father had other plans arranged for her to marry Edgar Hollister, the sheriff's son. Jennifer refused, said she had the right to choose her own husband. Blackstone didn't take it well. He paused, wincing as he shifted position. 3 nights ago, Jennifer came to the bunkhouse after dark, said her father had locked her in her room, was forcing the marriage within the week. She asked for my help to leave town. And you agreed, Sarah surmised. Sam nodded. I got her to the stage station, bought her a ticket to Denver where her aunt lives. I was heading back to collect my things when Blackstone and the sheriff confronted me in town, accused me of kidnapping Jennifer. When I explained she'd left willingly, Hollister drew on me. I defended myself. And shot him, wounded his arm, nothing serious. But then Blackstone pulled a derringer from his coat. We struggled and the gun went off. Sam's eyes darkened with the memory. Hit a bystander bartender who'd come outside to see what the commotion was. I ran and they've been after me since. Sarah studied him, looking for any sign of deception. That's quite a story, Mr. Keene. It's the truth, he replied simply, though I don't expect you to believe me on just my word. No, she agreed, taking his empty bowl. I don't, but I do know Sheriff Hollister's reputation. He's Blackstone's man through and through. Justice isn't his primary concern. She moved to the window again, gazing out at the darkening landscape. Rest for tonight. You're in no condition to travel anyway. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do with you. Sam leaned back, exhaustion etching lines in his face. Why help me at all? You've put yourself at risk. Sarah was quiet for a long moment before answering. Let's just say I understand what it means to need a fresh start. Now get some sleep. Those wounds need time to heal. As night fell across the Wyoming plains, Sarah kept watch by the window, her thoughts troubled. The wounded cowboy's presence complicated her carefully constructed solitude, but something in his story resonated with her own past. She glanced at Sam, now sleeping fitfully on her bed while she prepared to spend the night in the rocking chair. She'd fled her own demons to this remote homestead 3 years ago. Perhaps it was time to face them, or at least help someone else face theirs. Dawn broke with the distinctive sound of horses approaching. Sarah jerked awake in her chair, momentarily disoriented before remembering her unexpected guest. Sam was already awake, sitting up with obvious pain, listening intently. 2 riders, he murmured. coming slow. Sarah moved to the window, careful to stay hidden as she peered out. A man and woman approached on horseback, not the sheriff's posse from yesterday. The woman was young, perhaps 20, with honey blonde hair partially visible beneath her bonnet. The man was older, lean and hard-looking, with a rifle resting across his saddle. "You know them?" Sarah asked, passing Sam his revolver. His story might be true, but she wasn't taking chances. Sam squinted through the window and his expression shifted to one of surprise. "That's Jennifer Blackstone, and the man with her, that's Jacob Vale, her family's ranch foreman." Sarah watched as the pair drew closer, stopping about 20 yards from the cabin. The woman Jennifer dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd grown up on horseback. "Hello," she called out. "Is anyone home? We're looking for Samuel Keene." Sam moved to stand, grimacing with the effort. "I need to speak with her." "Wait," Sarah cautioned, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "Let me go first, if this is a trap." "Jennifer wouldn't do that," Sam insisted, but he sank back down, acknowledging his physical limitations. Sarah smoothed her skirt and opened the door, stepping onto the porch with measured confidence. "Can I help you folks?" Jennifer Blackstone approached, her expression hopeful. "I'm looking for a friend, Samuel Keene. We heard in town that a wounded man was seen heading this direction a few days ago." "Who's asking?" Sarah replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I'm Jennifer Blackstone, and this is Jacob Vale," the young woman explained. "Sam helped me escape an unwanted marriage. My father and Sheriff Hollister have been spreading lies about him. I came back from Denver as soon as I heard what happened." Sarah assessed the pair carefully. The girl seemed genuinely concerned, and there was no sign of deception in her earnest face. The man, Vale, remained on horseback, his watchful gaze constantly scanning their surroundings. "Miss Blackstone returned yesterday," Vale explained, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "When she learned what her father claimed about Keene, she insisted on searching for him. I couldn't let her ride alone." "You believe Sam's innocent?" Sarah asked directly. "I know he is," Jennifer replied firmly. "He saved me from a life of misery. My father is using his influence to hunt him down for defying him." Sarah made a decision. "Wait here." She disappeared back inside the cabin where Sam was attempting to stand, using the wall for support. "It's really her?" he asked, his voice betraying more emotion than Sarah had yet heard from him. Sarah nodded. "And she's brought your friend Vale." "He's a good man," Sam confirmed. "One of the few at Blackstone's ranch who treated the hands fairly." Sarah helped Sam to the door, supporting his weight as they emerged onto the porch. Jennifer's face lit up with relief, then quickly changed to concern as she noted his bandaged state. "Sam," she hurried forward. "Oh God, what have they done to you?" "Nothing I couldn't handle," Sam replied with a strained smile. "What are you doing back here, Jen? You were supposed to stay safe in Denver. How could I stay away when I heard they were hunting you like an animal?" Jennifer reached out, her fingers gently touching the bandage visible at his collar. "This is my fault." "No," Sam's response was immediate and firm. "You didn't ask to be treated like property. Your father made his choice and I made mine." Vale dismounted and approached, his weathered face grave. "Situation's worse than you know, Keene. Bartender died yesterday. Blackstone's calling it murder now, offering a substantial reward." Sarah felt Sam stiffen beside her. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," he murmured. "The gun went off during the struggle." "We know that," Jennifer assured him, "but my father won't rest until you're either hanged or dead." "You can't stay in the territory," Vale added bluntly. "Too many men willing to collect that bounty." Sarah looked between the three of them, her mind racing. "You both risked a lot coming here." "How did you find us?" "We didn't know for certain," Jennifer admitted. "But a trader mentioned seeing a wounded man heading this direction a few days ago. We've been checking isolated homesteads since dawn." "And your father doesn't know you've returned," Sarah pressed. Jennifer shook her head. "I came straight to Vale's cabin when I arrived. No one saw me." The foreman nodded in confirmation. "We've been careful, but it won't be long before someone recognizes Miss Blackstone, even with that dyed hair." Sarah noticed then that Jennifer's honey blonde locks were indeed several shades darker than they would naturally be, a simple but effective disguise. "You all need to come inside," Sarah decided. "Standing on the porch invites unwanted attention." Once inside, Sarah helped Sam back to the bed while Jennifer filled them in on everything that had happened in their absence. The young woman's determination was evident as she detailed her father's lies and the sheriff's convenient corroboration of events. "They're saying Sam kidnapped me at gunpoint, shot the sheriff when confronted, and then deliberately killed poor Mr. Collins, the bartender," Jennifer explained, indignation coloring her voice. "It's complete fabrication." "Doesn't matter," Vale said grimly. "It's their word against his, and Blackstone practically owns Sweetwater." Sarah brought coffee to the table where they gathered. "How far does his influence extend? Would Sam get a fair trial in Cheyenne?" Vale shook his head. "Blackstone has friends in the territorial government. Besides, they'd have to transport him there first, and I wouldn't wager on him surviving that journey." The gravity of the situation settled over them. Sam, who had been quiet during the discussion, finally spoke. "You should go back to Denver, Jen. There's nothing you can do here except put yourself in danger." "I won't abandon you," Jennifer insisted. "And what about you?" Sam turned to Sarah. "You've already risked enough harboring me. I can't ask you to get further involved." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "You didn't ask, I offered." She turned to Vale. "How long before the sheriff expands his search to include this area?" 2 days at most, the foreman estimated. "They're working in a pattern outward from town." Sarah nodded, decision made. "Then we have 2 days to get you somewhere safe, Mr. Keene." "Where?" Jennifer asked. "The nearest railroad is in Laramie, and that's 4 days' ride in his condition." "I know a place," Sarah said after a moment's hesitation. "A cabin in the high country that belonged to my late husband. Remote, difficult to find unless you know where to look." It was another lie. There had never been a husband, but the cabin was real, a sanctuary she'd discovered during her own flight from the past. "You do that for a stranger?" Sam asked quietly. Sarah met his questioning gaze. "Let's just say I recognize injustice when I see it." Vale cleared his throat. "It's a start, but not a solution. He can't hide in the mountains forever." "No," Sarah agreed, "but it buys us time to gather evidence that might clear his name." "What evidence?" Jennifer asked eagerly. "For starters, your testimony about leaving willingly," Sarah replied. "But more importantly, we need witnesses to the shooting, someone who saw the struggle with your father and can confirm it was an accident." Vale nodded slowly. "There were plenty of people outside the saloon that night." "Not everyone in town is under Blackstone's thumb." "I could talk to them," Jennifer offered. "If I disguise myself too risky," Vale interrupted. "Your father would recognize you in an instant, disguise or not." "I'll go," Sarah decided, surprising herself as much as the others. "No one in Sweetwater knows me. I can ask questions without arousing suspicion." Sam shook his head. "It's too dangerous. If Hollister or Blackstone suspect what you're doing, they won't." Sarah cut him off. "I know how to blend in. Besides, a woman alone tends to be overlooked, something I've found useful more than once." There was something in her tone that prevented further argument, a hardness that hinted at experiences she chose not to share. Vale studied her with newfound respect. "It could work," he acknowledged. "But you'll need a reason to be in town, asking questions." "I'll pose as a widow looking to settle nearby," Sarah suggested. "Natural to want to know about local troubles before deciding to stay." Jennifer reached across the table to grasp Sarah's hand. "Why would you take such a risk for someone you've just met?" Sarah withdrew her hand gently but firmly. "Because it's the right thing to do. Now we should prepare to move Mr. Keene tomorrow at first light. The longer he stays here, the greater the danger to all of us." As the others began planning the journey to the mountain cabin, Sarah slipped outside, needing a moment alone. The weight of her decision pressed on her. She had spent 3 years carefully avoiding entanglements, building walls around her solitary existence. Now she was voluntarily stepping back into the very kind of trouble she'd fled. She sensed rather than heard Sam's approach, his footsteps uneven but determined as he joined her by the corral fence. "You shouldn't be up," she admonished without turning. "Probably not," he agreed, leaning against the fence post for support. "But I needed to ask you something away from the others." Sarah finally looked at him, noting the feverish brightness in his eyes and the rigid set of his jaw as he fought against pain. "What is it?" "You're hiding something," he said simply. I recognize it because I've spent enough time running myself, Sarah stiffened. My past is my own business, Mr. Keene, Sam, he corrected gently, and I agree, I'm not asking for your history. I'm asking if helping me risks exposing whatever you're hiding. The directness of his question caught her off guard. She considered deflecting but found herself answering truthfully instead. Possibly, but that's my concern, not yours. It becomes mine when you risk yourself for my sake, Sam countered. His blue eyes, despite the pain clouding them, held steady on hers. I won't be responsible for bringing trouble to your door. The trouble was already here the moment you collapsed on my property, Sarah pointed out. And I made my choice then. Sam studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, for he nodded slightly. Thank you, Sarah Keller. Not everyone would show such courage. Don't mistake practicality for courage, she replied, uncomfortable with his gratitude. Now get back inside before you tear those stitches. He smiled faintly at her brisk tone but complied, making his slow way back to the cabin. Sarah remained outside, watching as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. She had decisions to make and preparations to complete before morning. Whatever came next would change everything for all of them. The mountain cabin emerged from the morning mist like a painting coming into focus, rough-hewn logs silvered with age, a stone chimney rising from the pitched roof, all nestled in a small clearing surrounded by pines. It had taken them the better part of 2 days to reach it, traveling mostly at night to avoid detection, moving slowly due to Sam's condition. Jennifer helped Sarah settle Sam inside while Vale tended to the horses. The interior was simple but surprisingly comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom separated by a curtain, and basic furnishings that spoke of careful craftsmanship. You've kept it maintained, Sam observed as Sarah kindled a fire to drive away the mountain chill. I come up occasionally, she acknowledged, avoiding elaboration. It's a good place to think. Jennifer explored the cabin with curious eyes. It's lovely, so peaceful here. And defensible, Vale noted as he entered, carrying their supplies. Single approach, good visibility, backup water source behind the cabin, smart location. Sarah nodded at his assessment. My husband chose well. The lie came easily now, practiced. We'll leave you with enough provisions for 2 weeks. That should give us time to investigate in Sweetwater. Us. Sam questioned from his place near the fire. I thought Vale was returning to the ranch to avoid suspicion. He is, Sarah confirmed. Jennifer will accompany me to town. Absolutely not, Sam straightened, wincing at the movement. It's too dangerous for her. Jennifer's expression hardened with determination. I'm not sitting idle in the mountains while others fight my battles, Sam. This began with me and I'll see it through. Your father will be looking for a blonde girl traveling alone or with you, Jennifer interrupted. Not a brunette widow's dark-haired daughter visiting town with her mother. Sarah nodded approval at Jennifer's reasoning. We've discussed it thoroughly. With proper disguise and caution, she'll be safer with me than left here with a wounded man who can barely stand. Sam looked between the two women, recognizing the futility of argument. Vale, the foreman shrugged. They've got the right of it, much as I hate to admit it. 2 women together draw less suspicion than one alone, and they can watch each other's backs. We'll take rooms at the hotel, Sarah continued. Establish ourselves as travelers considering settlement. That gives us reason to ask questions about the town, its people, recent events. And I know which townspeople might be sympathetic, Jennifer added. Those who have stood up to my father in the past, even in small ways. Sam still looked troubled. If anything happens to either of you. It won't, Sarah assured him with more confidence than she felt. We'll be careful, gather what information we can, and return in a week. Vale will check on you every few days when he can slip away without notice. The plan was set in motion. Vale departed first, taking a circuitous route back to the Blackstone ranch where his absence would be explained by a supposed hunting trip. Sarah and Jennifer prepared to leave the following morning, packing the appropriate clothing and creating a shared backstory to present in town. As evening settled over the cabin, Jennifer retired early, exhausted from their difficult journey. Sarah checked Sam's wounds, pleased to find them healing without infection despite the strain of travel. Your stitching would impress an army surgeon, Sam commented as she rewrapped his shoulder. I've had practice, she replied simply. Sam caught her wrist gently as she finished. Sarah. If this goes wrong. It won't, she insisted, trying to withdraw her hand. He held firm. If it does, I want you to know that I won't forget what you've done. Not many would risk themselves for a stranger's troubles. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Sarah pointed out, finally reclaiming her hand. And Jennifer needs someone on her side. Is that the only reason you're helping? Sam asked, his gaze searching her face. Sarah busied herself putting away the medical supplies. Does there need to be another? No, he admitted, but I think there is. She turned to face him, her expression guarded. What happened to you and Jennifer? It reminds me of something from my past. Let's leave it at that. Sam nodded, respecting her privacy. Fair enough. Just know that whatever ghosts you're carrying, they don't define you. Not to me. The simple statement struck deeper than Sarah expected, touching something long buried. She managed a small nod before retreating to the main room, claiming the need to prepare for tomorrow's journey. Morning came with a fine drizzle that shrouded the mountains in mist. Sarah and Jennifer departed with careful instructions for Sam's care in their absence and a promise to return within a week. The journey down from the high country was uneventful, and by nightfall of the second day they approached the outskirts of Sweetwater. The town sprawled along a wide creek, substantial enough to boast a proper main street with boardwalks, a two-story hotel, several saloons, and various businesses. Light spilled from windows into the gathering dusk as they rode past outlying houses toward the livery stable. Remember, Sarah murmured as they dismounted, you're Jane now, my daughter, recently widowed, traveling with me to consider a fresh start. Jennifer nodded, adjusting her dark bonnet to better shadow her face. And you're Judith Vale, widow from Colorado. Sarah checked her own appearance, the severe black dress of mourning, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, the somber expression of a woman who had faced hardship with dignity. It was a role she knew how to play all too well. They secured their horses at the livery and walked with measured steps to the Sweetwater Hotel, a respectable establishment catering to travelers and businessmen rather than the rowdier elements who frequented the saloons. The hotel clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on a prominent nose, looked up as they entered. Good evening, ladies. Looking for accommodations? Yes, Sarah replied in the slightly refined accent she'd adopted for her character. My daughter and I require a room for several nights. We're considering property in the area. The clerk's eyebrows rose with interest. Investment opportunity, madam? A home, Sarah corrected. My son-in-law passed recently, and we're looking to make a fresh start away from painful memories. Jennifer lowered her eyes in practiced grief, while the clerk made appropriate sympathetic noises. We have a lovely corner room available, quiet with a view of the mountains. Would that suit? Perfectly, Sarah signed the register as Judith Vale, noting the clerk's casual inspection of her signature. Information was currency in small towns, and she had no doubt their arrival would be common knowledge by morning. They were shown to their room, a comfortable space with twin beds and simple but well-maintained furnishings. Once alone, Jennifer collapsed onto one of the beds with a sigh of relief. I'd forgotten how stifling this town can be, she confessed. I feel like everyone is watching, even when they're not. In a place this size, they probably are, Sarah replied, unpacking their essentials. We'll start carefully tomorrow breakfast in the hotel dining room where we can observe and be observed. Then perhaps some shopping, casual conversation with storekeepers. The general store would be good, Jennifer suggested. Mrs. Patterson runs it, and she never approved of my father's methods. Her husband stood against him on the town council until he died last year. Sarah nodded approval. Perfect. We'll establish ourselves first, then gradually seek information about recent events. The next morning, they entered the hotel dining room dressed for a day of errands in town. Several patrons glanced their way with the natural curiosity afforded to newcomers. Sarah selected a table that offered both privacy and a view of the room, allowing them to observe while conversing quietly. The large man by the window is Mayor Thornton, Jennifer murmured behind her menu. Completely in my father's pocket. The couple in the corner are the Wilsons. He manages the bank. Sarah absorbed the information while maintaining the appearance of discussing breakfast options. Their meal passed pleasantly enough, with the waitress providing friendly service and a few casual questions about their plans in Sweetwater. "Such a lovely town," Sarah commented, "though we heard there was some trouble recently, a shooting of some kind." The waitress Mary, according to her introduction, hesitated briefly. "Just some unpleasantness at the saloon, madam, nothing for respectable ladies to concern themselves with." "How dreadful," Sarah replied with just the right amount of concern. "Is it safe here?" "My daughter and I have had our share of hardship. We're hoping for somewhere peaceful." Mary glanced around before leaning closer. "Sweetwater's plenty safe, madam. What happened was unusual. Just a cowboy who got ideas above his station tried to run off with a rancher's daughter." "Bad business all around." "How terrible," Jennifer murmured, keeping her eyes lowered. "Was anyone hurt?" "Sheriff was wounded, and poor Mr. Collins from the Empire Saloon was killed," Mary reported, warming to her audience. "The cowboy escaped, but they'll catch him. Mr. Blackstone's offering a substantial reward." "This Mr. Blackstone must be an important man here," Sarah observed casually. Mary nodded emphatically. "Owns the biggest spread in the county. Employs half the men around here at one time or another. Very generous to the town, too, funded our new schoolhouse last year." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a large man at their table, Sheriff Hollister, his badge prominently displayed on his vest. Sarah recognized him immediately from their encounter at her homestead, though she kept her expression neutral, showing only polite inquiry. "Good morning, ladies," he greeted, hat in hand. "Bill Hollister, County Sheriff. Mary tells me you're considering settling in our little community." Sarah offered a reserved smile. "How kind of you to welcome us, Sheriff. I'm Judith Vale, and this is my daughter Jane." Jennifer kept her gaze modestly downcast, murmuring a greeting. "Always pleased to see new faces," Hollister continued, his small eyes assessing them with poorly concealed suspicion. "Especially lovely ones. What brings you to Sweetwater specifically? We're a bit off the usual routes." "A land agent in Cheyenne mentioned properties available in this region," Sarah explained smoothly. "After my son-in-law's passing, we thought a change of scenery might be beneficial." The sheriff nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. "Well, you've chosen a good town, despite our recent troubles. If you need anything during your stay, my office is just down the street." "Actually," Sarah ventured, "our waitress mentioned something about a shooting. As women alone, we're naturally concerned about safety." Hollister's expression darkened. "Nothing for you to worry about, madam. Just a criminal matter we're handling. The man responsible won't be troubling Sweetwater again, I assure you." "That's very reassuring," Sarah replied. "I understand a reward has been offered." $10,000, Hollister confirmed with a grim smile. "Dead or alive, though Mr. Blackstone would prefer the former, saves the expense of a trial." Jennifer's teacup rattled slightly against its saucer, but she quickly steadied her hand. Sarah filled the moment by asking, "This Mr. Blackstone sounds like a prominent citizen." "The most prominent," Hollister agreed. "You'll likely meet him soon. He comes to town most days, has business interests beyond his ranch. Good man to know if you're considering property." With a final tip of his hat, the sheriff departed, leaving Sarah and Jennifer to exchange meaningful glances. The amount of the reward was staggering, far more than would be typical for even a serious crime. It spoke to Blackstone's determination and resources. They spent the remainder of the day as planned, visiting shops, making small purchases to establish their presence, and engaging in careful conversation with townspeople. The general store proved particularly valuable, as Mrs. Patterson was indeed inclined to share her views once she determined they weren't closely associated with the Blackstone interests. "Tragic business with young Jennifer Blackstone," the storekeeper commented as she wrapped Sarah's purchases in brown paper. "Such a sweet girl. Used to come in for peppermint sticks since she was knee-high." "We heard she was taken against her will," Sarah probed delicately. Mrs. Patterson snorted softly. "That's Blackstone's story. Between us, that girl had been looking for escape ever since her father arranged that marriage to young Hollister. No love there, just business between the sheriff and Blackstone. You don't believe she was kidnapped? Jennifer asked, her voice carefully modulated. The older woman studied Jennifer for a moment. You remind me of someone dear. Have we met before? I don't believe so, Jennifer replied, heart racing beneath her calm exterior. We've only just arrived in town. Mrs. Patterson seemed to accept this, continuing her thoughts. Well, all I know is Jennifer Blackstone never showed a moment's fear around Samuel Keene when they came to my store, and that young man was unfailingly polite, not the type to force a woman anywhere. You knew him well, Sarah inquired. As well as anyone in town, I suppose. He'd stopped by for supplies, always had a kind word. Came from back east, originally had some education, you could tell by his speech. Worked various ranches before settling at Blackstone's. This new information about Sam's background intrigued Sarah, but she kept her expression merely interested. It sounds as though you doubt he's guilty of what they claim. Mrs. Patterson glanced toward the street before replying in a lowered voice. What I doubt, Mrs. Vale, is the official story. Collins was well liked, but everyone knows he wasn't killed intentionally. Several people saw the struggle between Keene and Blackstone over that derringer. Then why hasn't anyone spoken up? Jennifer asked with barely concealed frustration. Fear, dear, Mrs. Patterson replied simply. Blackstone can make or break most folks in this town. Those who saw what happened either work for him, owe him money, or have family who depend on his goodwill. The storekeeper wrapped their final purchase with precise movements. It's a shame what power can do to a man's sense of justice. James Blackstone wasn't always this way. His wife's death changed him, made him hard, controlling, especially with his daughter. Sarah accepted the packages, her mind working rapidly. Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Patterson. It's valuable to understand a community before deciding to join it. Will you be staying long? The woman asked. A few more days, Sarah replied. We have several properties to consider. As they left the store, Jennifer whispered, we need to find someone willing to testify to what really happened, someone beyond Blackstone's influence. Easier said than done, Sarah murmured back. But Mrs. Patterson might be willing to point us in the right direction if approached carefully. Their conversation halted abruptly as a fine carriage passed them on the street, drawn by a matching pair of black horses. The man inside, distinguished, silver-haired, with a bearing that commanded attention, fixed them with a curious stare as he passed. My father, Jennifer breathed, her body tensing. Sarah placed a steadying hand on her arm. Keep walking, don't react. The carriage continued past them, but Sarah noted how the man turned to look back at them, his expression thoughtful. A chill ran through her at the intensity of his gaze. He suspects something, Jennifer whispered, her face pale. He always had an uncanny ability to recognize people, even in disguise. He saw two women shopping, nothing more, Sarah reassured her, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Let's return to the hotel, we've done enough for today. That evening, they reviewed their findings in the privacy of their room. They had identified several potential witnesses to the shooting, including a stable hand who worked across from the saloon and an elderly man who resided above the barber shop with a clear view of the street where the confrontation occurred. We'll approach them tomorrow, Sarah decided. Separately and discreetly, Jennifer nodded, then hesitated. I've been thinking about Sam, alone up there in the cabin. His wounds were improving, but infection is still a risk. Vale will check on him in 2 days, Sarah reminded her, and Sam's stronger than he appears. He survived 2 bullets and a difficult journey. You've grown to care for him, Jennifer observed quietly. Sarah paused in her preparations for bed. I respect his courage and principles, that's all. Jennifer smiled knowingly but didn't press the issue. We should be careful tomorrow. My father's appearance today troubles me. He rarely comes to town without purpose. We'll be vigilant, Sarah agreed. Now get some rest. Tomorrow may prove challenging. Morning brought clear skies and bustling activity to Sweetwater's Main Street. Sarah and Jennifer separated after breakfast. Jennifer to engage the stable hand in conversation while examining horses supposedly for purchase. Sarah to seek out the elderly resident above the barber shop. Sarah found Mr. Donovan exactly where Mrs. Patterson had described sitting in a chair on the small balcony overlooking the main street, observing town life with the patient interest of one whose mobility was limited by age. Approaching him required passing through the barber shop and climbing a narrow set of stairs, which she managed with a plausible story about delivering baked goods from a non-existent church committee. "Don't recall asking for any charity," the old man grumbled when she appeared on his modest porch, though he eyed the small cake she carried with interest. "Not charity, Mr. Donovan," Sarah corrected gently. "Just neighborliness. I'm new in town and looking to make acquaintances." He squinted at her suspiciously. "Mighty particular about who you befriend, choosing an old man like me." Sarah smiled, setting the cake on the small table beside him. "I've found that those who observe much often have the most interesting perspectives to share." This seemed to please him, his weathered face crinkling into a reluctant smile. "Well, pull up that chair if you're staying. Don't get many visitors except Doc Wilson when my lungs act up." Sarah settled beside him, maintaining the pretense of friendly conversation while gradually steering toward the events of the shooting. Donovan, as she'd hoped, required little prompting once the subject arose. "Saw the whole thing clear as day," he confirmed, jabbing a gnarled finger toward the street. "Was sitting right here when the ruckus started. Hollister and Blackstone confronted that ranch hand Keene right outside the Empire." "What happened?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice casual despite her intense interest. Heated words at first, couldn't hear exactly what was said, but Blackstone was red-faced, shouting about his daughter. Keene stayed calm, hands visible, trying to explain something. Donovan paused to take a bite of cake. Then Hollister drew his gun, real sudden-like, no warning, no cause that I could see. "And Keene defended himself," Donovan nodded. "Quick draw, clean shot to Hollister's arm. Wasn't trying to kill him. If he had been, the sheriff would be 6 feet under. Keene was known to be handy with a gun." "What about Mr. Collins, the bartender?" Sarah pressed. The old man's expression grew somber. "That was Blackstone's doing, plain and simple. After Hollister was hit, Blackstone pulled a small gun from inside his coat. Keene tried to disarm him. They struggled, and the gun went off. Collins had just stepped outside to see what the commotion was about. Wrong place, wrong moment. His account matched Sam's exactly, confirming what Sarah had begun to suspect. "Have you told the authorities what you saw?" Donovan snorted derisively. "The authorities around here take their orders from Blackstone. Besides, who'd take the word of a rheumatic old man over the richest rancher in the county? The truth should matter," Sarah insisted. "Should, yes, does." He shook his head wearily. "This ain't my first go-round with Blackstone justice, madam. 10 years back, I owned a small spread north of town. Good water, decent grazing. Blackstone wanted it to complete his northern boundary. When I wouldn't sell, mysterious fires started, cattle disappeared. Eventually had no choice but to sell for a pittance." Sarah digested this information with growing concern. The pattern of intimidation and control painted a disturbing picture of the man hunting Sam. "What if someone was willing to stand with you?" she suggested cautiously. "Other witnesses who saw the same thing," Donovan studied her with suddenly sharp eyes. "You're mighty interested in old history for a newcomer, Mrs. Vale," she supplied. "And I have a strong dislike for injustice, Mr. Donovan. Careful, Mrs. Vale," he warned. "Asking such questions in Sweetwater can lead to trouble." "I appreciate your concern," Sarah replied, rising to leave. "And thank you for the conversation. It's been most illuminating." As she departed, Donovan called after her, "If you're looking for others who might have seen something, try Caleb Tucker. Works at the livery. Boy was sweeping the boardwalk outside when it happened." Sarah thanked him with a nod and made her way back to the street, her mind racing with possibilities. If they could gather enough witness testimony, perhaps they could approach the territorial marshal directly, bypassing Hollister's corrupt influence. She was so preoccupied with these thoughts that she nearly collided with a man entering the barbershop, James Blackstone himself. He steadied her with a hand on her arm, apologizing politely before recognition flickered in his eyes. "Mrs. Vale, isn't it?" he inquired, his tone pleasant though his grip remained firm on her arm. "I believe I saw you and your daughter yesterday." Sarah forced a smile, acutely aware of his scrutiny. Yes, we're visiting Sweetwater to consider property. You have a lovely town. Indeed we do, Blackstone agreed, finally releasing her arm. I understand you've been making inquiries about our recent unpleasantness. The directness of his statement confirmed Sarah's fears in a town this size. With Blackstone's influence, their questions had not gone unnoticed. Merely due diligence before deciding to settle, she explained smoothly. Any prudent person would want to understand local concerns. Of course, Blackstone's smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I'm curious why your inquiries seem particularly focused on witness accounts rather than general safety matters. Sarah maintained her composure despite the clear warning in his words. I've always believed in forming independent judgments, Mr. Blackstone. A habit from my late husband's legal practice, a lawyer's widow, Blackstone mused. How interesting. Well, Mrs. Vale, I hope you find Sweetwater to your liking. We welcome new residents, especially those who understand the value of community harmony. The threat beneath his cordial tone was unmistakable. Sarah inclined her head in acknowledgement. Community is indeed important, Mr. Blackstone, as is justice. His expression hardened momentarily before he mastered it. Indeed, good day to you, Mrs. Vale. Sarah watched him enter the barber shop, her heart pounding despite her outward calm. She needed to find Jennifer and compare findings. Their time in Sweetwater had just become considerably more dangerous. She located Jennifer at the hotel, already returned from her own investigation and visibly agitated. As soon as their room door closed behind them, Jennifer burst out, "We've been discovered. My father sent a telegram to Denver checking on my whereabouts. The station master told me a reply came this morning confirming I never arrived at my aunt's home. And I just had a rather pointed conversation with your father," Sarah added grimly, quickly relating her encounter with Blackstone. Jennifer sank onto the bed, face pale. "He suspects who I am. He may not be certain yet, but he's suspicious enough to investigate. We need to leave tonight," Sarah decided. "We have enough testimony to approach the territorial marshal in Cheyenne." Mr. Donovan confirmed Sam's account exactly, and apparently there's a boy at the livery who witnessed it too. "Caleb," Jennifer nodded. "I spoke with him briefly. He's terrified of my father but admitted he saw everything. Said Blackstone fired the shot that killed Collins, not Sam." Sarah began gathering their belongings. "If we leave after dark," a sharp knock at their door interrupted her. They exchanged alarmed glances before Sarah cautiously approached, calling out, "Who is it?" "Sheriff Hollister, madam. Need a word with you and your daughter." Sarah hesitated, then whispered to Jennifer, "Stay calm, follow my lead." She opened the door with a politely questioning expression. "Sheriff, is something wrong?" Hollister stood in the hallway, flanked by two deputies. His manner had lost all pretense of courtesy. "I need you both to accompany me to my office. Mr. Blackstone has some questions about your identities and purpose in Sweetwater." "I don't understand," Sarah protested, though she understood all too well. "We've been completely forthcoming about our reasons for visiting." "Then you won't mind clearing up a few discrepancies," Hollister replied, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered gun. "Now, ladies." Sarah recognized there was no choice but to comply. Resistance would only confirm their deception and possibly lead to violence. She nodded to Jennifer, who collected her shawl with trembling hands. They were escorted through the hotel lobby, drawing curious stares from other guests. The sheriff's office was a short, humiliating walk down the main street, with townspeople stopping to observe their passage. Sarah held her head high, mind racing to formulate a plan. The office was a simple building with a front room containing the sheriff's desk and 3 cells visible at the back. James Blackstone waited inside, seated in the sheriff's chair with the confidence of a man in his own domain. "Ah, the Vale women," he greeted them, his voice dangerously soft. "Or should I say, Miss Blackstone and her mysterious accomplice." Jennifer stiffened but remained silent, following Sarah's earlier instruction. "I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding," Sarah began, but Blackstone cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Enough pretense. My daughter may have altered her appearance, but a father knows his own child." His gaze shifted to Jennifer, hardening with anger. You've caused quite enough trouble, young lady, running away, consorting with that murderer Keene, and now this elaborate charade." "Sam isn't a murderer," Jennifer finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "You killed Mr. Collins' father when your gun went off during the struggle." Blackstone's face flushed with rage. "You dare, we have witnesses," Sarah interrupted. "People who saw exactly what happened that night. Mr. Donovan from above the barber shop, Caleb Tucker from the livery. They'll testify that the shooting was accidental during a struggle you initiated." Sheriff Hollister laughed dismissively. "Old man Donovan is half blind and wholly senile. And young Tucker knows better than to contradict his betters." "Perhaps," Sarah acknowledged, "but will every witness be so easily dismissed? We've spent 2 days gathering accounts, Sheriff. People talk more freely to women they believe are simply passing through." It was a bluff. They had only the 2 confirmed witnesses, but the momentary uncertainty that crossed Blackstone's face suggested it had struck home. "It doesn't matter," Blackstone recovered quickly. "Even if the bartender's death was accidental, Keene shot the sheriff a hanging offense. And he abducted my daughter." "I went willingly," Jennifer insisted. "I'm 20 years old, Father. I have the right to choose my own path, my own husband." "Husband?" Blackstone's voice rose dangerously. "That saddle tramp, you think I'd allow such a match?" "It's not for you to allow or forbid," Jennifer replied with newfound courage. "I love him and he loves me." Sarah watched the exchange with growing concern. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and they were outnumbered in a town controlled by their adversary. She needed to change the dynamic somehow. "Mr. Blackstone," she interjected, her voice deliberately calm, "regardless of your feelings about Mr. Keene, surely your daughter's happiness means something to you." "You know nothing about my family," he snapped. "Stay out of matters that don't concern you." "But they do concern me," Sarah countered. "When innocent men are hunted and justice is corrupted, it concerns every decent person." Blackstone studied her with cold calculation. "Who are you really? Why involve yourself in this affair?" "My name is Sarah Keller," she admitted, abandoning the pretense. "I found Samuel Keene wounded on my property and chose to help him. The rest followed naturally." "Sarah Keller," Hollister repeated, frowning. "That homestead north of Eagle Creek. You told me your husband would be returning when we searched for Keene." "A necessary deception at the time," Sarah acknowledged. "I live alone." Blackstone's expression changed, recognition dawning. "Keller, not Thomas Keller's widow from St. Louis." Sarah went very still, her worst fears confirmed. Of course Blackstone would have connections that reached that far. That was a lifetime ago. "The banker's wife who disappeared after he was murdered," Blackstone continued, watching her reaction closely. "Suspected of involvement, though never charged. How interesting." Jennifer looked at Sarah with shock, but Sarah kept her attention fixed on Blackstone. "My husband was killed by business associates over financial irregularities I knew nothing about. I left because powerful men decided I was a convenient scapegoat, much as you've decided Samuel Keene makes a convenient murderer." "Sheriff," Blackstone turned to Hollister, "I believe we have more than one fugitive on our hands. Send telegrams to St. Louis immediately." "That won't be necessary," a new voice interrupted from the doorway. All heads turned to see Jacob Vale standing there, rifle in hand, with Sam leaning against the doorframe beside him, pale but upright, his revolver trained steadily on Hollister. "Sam!" Jennifer exclaimed, starting toward him before the sheriff's deputy blocked her path. "Step away from the ladies, Hollister," Sam ordered, his voice strained but determined. The sheriff's hand hovered near his gun. "You're making a mistake, Keene. There's no way out of this for you." "There's always a way," Vale contradicted, moving further into the room, his rifle covering the deputies. "Especially when the territorial marshal is currently enjoying breakfast at the hotel, reviewing sworn statements from witnesses to the shooting." Blackstone rose from his chair, incredulous. "What is this?" "Insurance," Sarah explained, allowing herself a small smile. "We weren't just gathering testimony these past days, we were sending it directly to Cheyenne with travelers leaving town. Marshal Evans arrived this morning specifically to investigate corruption allegations against Sheriff Hollister." It was another bluff, but delivered with such conviction that doubt flickered across both Blackstone's and Hollister's faces. Sam stepped forward, wincing slightly but maintaining his aim. "It's over, Blackstone. Even with your influence, you can't silence everyone. Too many saw what really happened." The standoff stretched for a tense moment before Blackstone's composure cracked. With surprising speed for a man his age, he yanked open a desk drawer and pulled out a revolver. Several things happened simultaneously. Hollister drew his weapon. The deputies reached for theirs. Vale shouted a warning. The first shot came from Blackstone, aimed directly at Sam. Sarah reacted instinctively, shoving Jennifer aside and lunging toward Sam. Pain exploded in her upper arm as Blackstone's bullet found flesh. More shots followed in rapid succession, the small office filling with gunsmoke and confusion. When the chaos cleared, Hollister was clutching a bleeding hand. One deputy was down with a leg wound, and Blackstone stood frozen, Vale's rifle trained unwavering on his chest. Sam had an arm around Sarah, supporting her as blood seeped through her sleeve. "Anyone else want to try something foolish?" Vale asked conversationally, though his eyes were hard as flint. The unmistakable sound of multiple horses and men approaching drew everyone's attention. Through the window, Sarah could see a group of riders dismounting outside, led by a distinguished man wearing the territorial marshal's badge. "It seems your bluff wasn't entirely a bluff," Sam murmured to Sarah, his breath warm against her ear. "Not entirely," she agreed weakly, the pain in her arm growing more intense. "I did send a message to Cheyenne. I just wasn't certain he'd arrive in time." The marshal entered, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "I see I've arrived at an interesting moment." Marshal Robert Evans. "Someone want to explain why my peaceful breakfast was interrupted by gunfire?" What followed was a flurry of accusations, explanations, and counterclaims. Evans, a no-nonsense former Army officer with a reputation for incorruptibility, quickly established control of the situation. He ordered his deputies to secure the weapons and provide medical attention to the wounded, including Sarah. As the town doctor tended to her arm a clean through, and through that had missed bone and major vessels, Sarah observed the marshal methodically interviewing everyone present. Jennifer stayed close to Sam, supporting him as his strength, depleted by his journey from the mountain cabin, began to wane. "You risked yourself for me," Sam said quietly when they had a moment alone, the doctor having moved on to attend Hollister's wounded hand. "That bullet was meant for me." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Consider it payment for the trouble I've brought you if Blackstone hadn't recognized my name." "He was grasping at straws," Sam replied. "Whatever happened in St. Louis doesn't change who you are now, the woman who saved my life, who risked everything for justice." Before Sarah could respond, Marshal Evans approached them. "Mrs. Keller, Mr. Keene, I've heard multiple versions of events, but I'd like yours directly." They provided their accounts, supported by Jennifer and Vale. Evans listened attentively, occasionally making notes in a small book. "There's something else you should know," Sarah added when they finished. "Mr. Donovan from above the barber shop and young Caleb Tucker from the livery both witnessed the shooting. They can confirm that Colin's death was accidental during a struggle initiated by Blackstone." Evans nodded. "I'll speak with them. In the meantime, Sheriff Hollister will be temporarily relieved of duty pending investigation into corruption charges, and Mr. Blackstone will be held on attempted murder charges for his actions here today." "And Sam?" Jennifer asked anxiously. "Mr. Keene remains a person of interest in this investigation," Evans replied carefully. "But given the consistent witness accounts and the evident misconduct by local authorities, I see no need to hold him at present. I would, however, request that none of you leave the territory until this matter is fully resolved." It was more than they had dared hope for the beginning of justice, at least. As Evans departed to continue his investigation, Jennifer embraced Sam with tears of relief, while Sarah watched with a complex mixture of emotions she wasn't yet ready to examine. "What now?" Vale asked pragmatically once they had a moment of privacy. "We recover," Sarah decided, glancing at her bandaged arm and Sam's still healing wounds. "And we wait for the marshal to complete his investigation. You can all stay at my homestead," she added after a moment's consideration. It's safer than remaining in town with Blackstone's supporters still about. The days that followed brought gradual healing, both physical and emotional. Marshal Evans conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing numerous townspeople who, freed from the immediate fear of Blackstone's reprisals, finally spoke truthfully about what they had witnessed. Evans also sent inquiries to St. Louis regarding Sarah's past. The replies confirmed her account. She had been suspected primarily due to her husband's position and her subsequent disappearance. New evidence had since implicated Thomas Keller's business partners, clearing Sarah's name even in her absence. At the homestead, an unexpected domesticity developed as they recovered from their ordeal. Vail returned to the Blackstone ranch to oversee operations during the upheaval, reporting that many of the hands were actually relieved by the change in management. Jennifer revealed unexpected talents in the kitchen, while Sam, as his strength returned, assisted with repairs and improvements to the small cabin. Sarah found herself observing Sam with growing awareness, the gentle way he interacted with Jennifer, his quiet competence with physical tasks, the thoughtful questions he asked about Sarah's life and plans. She had lived alone for so long that the presence of others in her space should have been intrusive. Instead, it felt increasingly natural. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Sam finally broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "Jennifer and I have been talking," he began, his voice careful, "about the future." Sarah felt an unexpected pang at his words. Of course they would be planning their life together. Their feelings for each other had been evident from the beginning. "Marshal Evans believes the charges against me will be dropped entirely," Sam continued. "With Blackstone facing his own legal troubles and the true account of events established, there's no case to pursue." "I'm glad," Sarah replied sincerely. "You deserve the chance to move forward." Sam studied her profile in the fading light. "The question is, where? Jennifer's aunt has offered her the deed to a small property near Denver, nothing like Blackstone's spread, but good land with potential." "Denver would suit you both," Sarah observed, keeping her tone neutral despite the hollowness expanding in her chest. "Far enough from Sweetwater to avoid painful memories, but close enough to visit friends." "Like you?" Sam asked quietly. Sarah forced a smile. "I'm hardly the visiting type, Mr. Keene, but you'd both be welcome if you ever passed this way." Sam shifted to face her more directly. "You misunderstand, Sarah. I'm not telling you our plans. I'm asking for your thoughts, your wishes." Confusion furrowed her brow. "My wishes don't factor into your decisions. You and Jennifer should do what brings you happiness." "That's just it." Sam reached out, hesitantly covering her hand with his. "Jennifer's happiness includes Vail." Sarah blinked, processing his words. "Jacob Vail, but I thought." Sam's mouth curved into a gentle smile. "That Jennifer and I were romantically involved. No, we care deeply for each other, but as friends, almost as brother and sister. Her father prevented her from forming connections with most young men, but as a ranch hand, I was beneath his notice until he realized we were confidants." "But you helped her escape," Sarah pointed out, still confused. "Risked your life." "Because she deserved freedom and Vail deserved a chance," Sam explained. "They've loved each other for years, secretly. Blackstone would never have approved Vail may be his foreman, but he's still an employee, not the socially advantageous match Blackstone wanted." Sarah absorbed this revelation, reassessing countless interactions she had observed between Jennifer and Vail, the glances, the quiet conversations, the way they gravitated toward each other when they thought no one was watching. "She never told me," Sarah murmured. "She wasn't sure how you felt," Sam replied, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "About me." The directness of his statement sent warmth flooding through her. "I'm not sure I know myself," she admitted. "It's been a long time since I allowed myself to feel much of anything beyond survival." Sam nodded, understanding in his blue eyes. "Then perhaps we both need time. I just wanted you to know that when I consider my future, you feature prominently in those thoughts." The simple honesty of his declaration touched something long dormant within Sarah. "And what do these thoughts entail, Mr. Keene?" "A partnership," he replied without hesitation. Two people who have seen darkness but choose to move toward light. Building something together day by day with patience and care. That sounds uncommonly sensible, Sarah observed, though her heart beat faster at his words. Sam laughed softly. I've learned that life rarely gives second chances. When they come, it's wise to approach them deliberately. Their conversation was interrupted by Jennifer and Vale returning from their walk, their clasped hands and slightly flushed faces suggesting their stroll had included more than just conversation. Sarah greeted them with new understanding, noting the happiness that radiated from both. Later that night, alone in her room, Sarah considered Sam's words. A partnership. Not the passionate declarations of undying love found in novels, but something arguably more valuable, a steadfast commitment to build something meaningful together, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. She realized with sudden clarity that in helping Sam, in fighting for justice alongside him, she had begun to reclaim parts of herself long suppressed. The woman who stood up to Blackstone and Hollister wasn't just Sarah Keller, the reclusive homesteader. She was also the person she had been before tragedy and fear had narrowed her world. Marshal Evans returned to the homestead the following week with news that vindicated their efforts. Based on multiple witness testimonies and evidence of corruption, all charges against Sam had been dismissed. Sheriff Hollister faced his own legal troubles, while Blackstone awaited trial for attempted murder and obstruction of justice. The territorial governor sends his apologies for your ordeal, Mr. Keene, Evans informed them as they gathered in Sarah's small main room. He's also extended an offer of compensation for your troubles. Sam shook his head. I don't want money, I just want to move forward. Evans nodded understanding. As for you, Mrs. Keller, inquiries to St. Louis confirm your account entirely. You're free of any cloud of suspicion that might have followed you. Sarah absorbed this news with quiet gratitude. 3 years of looking over her shoulder, of wondering if her past would find her ended with a few telegrams and an official's declaration. What happens to the Blackstone Ranch? Vale asked practically. It remains in family ownership, Evans replied. Which means it belongs to Miss Blackstone now as the sole heir. Her father will likely spend years in territorial prison given the severity of his crimes. Jennifer looked stunned by this development. I never wanted his empire, just freedom to choose my own path. Sometimes life gives us responsibilities we didn't seek, Vale observed gently, but it also gives us the choice of how to meet them. The implications settled over the group as Evans took his leave. Jennifer had inherited one of the largest cattle operations in the territory, with all the power and influence that entailed. What she would do with such responsibility remained to be seen. In the days that followed, decisions took shape. Jennifer and Vale would marry and assume management of the renamed Vale Ranch, with plans to operate it with greater fairness to both workers and neighboring smallholders than Blackstone had shown. We'd like you to be part of it, Jennifer told Sam and Sarah one evening as they shared dinner. Both of you, there's the foreman's house, it's comfortable, private, or parcels of land if you prefer your independence. Sam glanced at Sarah, careful not to presume. It's a generous offer. But, Jennifer prompted, sensing his hesitation. But perhaps too many ghosts, Sam replied honestly. For all of us. The Blackstone Ranch, even renamed, carries history that might be better left behind. Vale nodded understanding. We considered that too, which is why we're thinking of selling most of the operation. Keeping just enough for ourselves, dividing the rest into fair parcels for those who have wanted land of their own. My father accumulated his holdings by driving others out, Jennifer explained. It feels right to reverse that legacy. And you? Sarah asked Sam quietly when they were alone later, walking beneath a sky ablaze with stars. What will you do now that you're truly free? Sam considered the question, his pace measured to match hers. I have some savings from my years of work. Enough to start something modest, perhaps a small horse breeding operation. I've always had a way with difficult mounts. Where? Sarah pressed gently. Sam stopped walking to face her directly. That depends on you, Sarah. These past weeks have taught me what matters most, not just survival, but living with purpose, with connection. He took a breath, vulnerability evident in his expression. I care for you, deeply, more than I thought possible after such a short acquaintance. But I won't presume upon your solitude if that's what you truly prefer. Sarah felt the familiar urge to retreat, to protect herself from the risk of attachment, but alongside it grew a newer, stronger desire to step toward possibility rather than away from it. My homestead has good grazing to the north, she found herself saying. Excellent water access, suitable for horses, I would think. Hope kindled in Sam's eyes. Is that an invitation, Miss Keller? It's a suggestion, Mr. Keene, Sarah replied, a smile tugging at her lips. That perhaps your talents and my land might form a beneficial partnership. Sam's hand found hers in the darkness. A partnership, I like that word. It's a beginning, Sarah agreed, allowing her fingers to intertwine with his. The rest, I suppose, we'll discover together. 1 year later, the homestead had transformed. New fencing enclosed expanded pastures where a small herd of carefully selected breeding stock grazed. The cabin had grown by several rooms, its once stark interior now warmed by simple comforts and personal touches. A sign at the entrance to the property read Keller and Keene Horse Farm in freshly painted letters. Sarah stood on the porch, watching Sam work with a spirited 2-year-old colt in the training ring. His patience with the animal was remarkable, firm but never harsh, guiding rather than forcing, building trust through consistent care. It was the same approach he had taken with her heart. She reflected, allowing her the time and space to lower her defenses naturally, never pushing beyond what she was ready to give. Their relationship had developed gradually, friendship deepening into something more substantial with each passing day. Sam had built his own small cabin on the property at first, respecting Sarah's need for independence even as they worked side by side establishing their business. But as winter approached and their feelings could no longer be denied, he had moved into the main house, becoming her partner in every sense. They had married in a simple ceremony the previous spring, with Jennifer and Vale standing witness. The former Blackstone empire had indeed been divided, transformed into a patchwork of thriving smaller operations owned by families who had never dreamed of having land of their own. Jennifer and Vale managed a modestly sized ranch that focused on quality rather than quantity, their first child expected in the coming winter. Sarah's reflections were interrupted as Sam finished the training session and approached the porch, his face lit with satisfaction at the colt's progress. At 34, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had found his place in the world. The physical scars from his bullet wounds had faded to silvery marks on his skin touchpoints in their shared history that Sarah sometimes traced with gentle fingers in the privacy of their bedroom. He's coming along nicely, Sam commented, removing his gloves as he climbed the porch steps. Another month and he'll be ready for more advanced training. The Wilsons will be pleased, Sarah replied. They've had their eyes on him since he was foaled. Sam nodded, then studied her face with the perceptive attention that still sometimes caught her off guard. You're thinking deep thoughts today. Everything all right, Sarah smiled, reaching out to brush dust from his shirt. Just reflecting, on endings that become beginnings, on how a wounded cowboy who didn't want pity somehow managed to heal wounds I didn't even recognize I carried. Sam caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Seems to me the healing went both ways. You offered care when I needed it most, not just for bullet wounds, but for a soul that had forgotten what home could feel like. Their eyes held in a moment of perfect understanding. At 32, Sarah had found a peace she had never expected to know again after fleeing St. Louis. The woman who had once lived in constant readiness to run had put down roots deep enough to weather any storm. We should celebrate, Sam suggested suddenly. 1 year since we started this operation. Invite Jennifer and Vale, maybe a few others. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Are you proposing a party, Mr. Keene? How uncharacteristically social of you. I'm proposing we acknowledge how far we've come, he corrected with a smile. Together. Sarah considered the suggestion, finding she welcomed it where once the idea of entertaining would have filled her with anxiety. I think that sounds lovely, perhaps next weekend. Sam's answer was to draw her into his arms, his embrace conveying everything words could not: gratitude, belonging, the quiet certainty of shared purpose. Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. Two people who had separately known darkness, now walking together in light. Not the dramatic passion of storybooks, but something far more valuable, a love built day by day through conscious choice and steady care. As the Wyoming sunset painted the distant mountains in gold, Sarah reflected that some journeys only make sense when viewed in retrospect. The wounds that had brought them together had healed, leaving behind not weakness but strength, the resilience of those who had faced adversity and emerged intact together. "I love you," she murmured against his shirt, the words still new enough to feel momentous each time she spoke them. Sam's arms tightened around her, his voice a low rumble she felt as much as heard. "And I love you, Sarah Keene, yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." In that moment, on a homestead transformed by shared vision, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just healing, but home. Not in the walls of the cabin or the boundaries of the land, but in the partnership they had forged, two souls who had recognized in each other not just what they were, but what they could become together. The cowboy who'd been shot twice had found more than care. The woman who'd offered it had found more than purpose. Together, they had found the rarest gift of all, a love strong enough to bridge past and future, turning wounds into wisdom and solitude into shared strength.